On this day, in 1890, as the sun was setting over what had been Good Friday, a pall of mystery and panic was thrown over the small community of Sandgate, a beachside area just north of Brisbane. Throughout the day, whilst most in the region were enjoying their day of rest, a party of men led by George Hamilton had been engaged in survey work across an area known as Brighton Paddock, or to the locals as the Old Police Paddock. At 5:30 in the afternoon, as the light began to fail, George made the decision to pack up tools and head back to their camp, following a well-worn path that led to their destination. Shortly after starting out, a dog burst out of the long grass alongside the track, menacing the party as they approached. On gazing over the thicket from which the dog had appeared, the three surveyors' gazes fell on a man's prostrate frame, initially hidden from view in the undergrowth. Struggling to get a better look at the body, past the dog which refused to allow them any closer, Hamilton determined the man was deceased and recognised the clothing as belonging to a local named Frenchie, whom he'd seen in the area previously. Unable to do more, the party returned to their camp and a rider was sent to notify the local police. A detective and party of Indigenous trackers were sent with haste to Sandgate via train from Brisbane and arrived in the early hours of the following morning. By that time, the local police, accompanied by a local doctor, Dr. Paul, had visited the scene in an attempt to identify the body. It was apparent that, from the orientation of the body in relation to the track, some attempts had been made to drag the man into the undergrowth by his feet. Removing a cloth bag that had been draped over the man's head, all in attendance reeled. Part of the victim's brain was protruding from a large fracture in the back of the skull, and no doubt now existed that he'd met with foul play. On the body being removed and transported to the Osborne Hotel at Sandgate, an autopsy was finally made possible. The unfortunate soul was finally identified as Gervais Dubrocca, an eccentric French basket maker who lived locally and was known affectionately by all and sundry in the region. Despite his good reputation, however, Dubrocca was oft to mention in passing that he feared of being done in one day, and appeared quite serious about his premonitions of being murdered by an old enemy. The medical examination shed light on the ferociousness of the attack that had brought Dubrocca's life to a premature end. It was postulated the poor man had first been stabbed in the neck, the attempt on his life having failed when the blade of the knife snapped, being found still lodged in Gervais's neck during the autopsy. Wounded and weakened, he had then been horrifically bludgeoned about the head, the wounds inflicted being of such a serious nature they had resulted in almost instantaneous death. After weeks of scouring the area, both around Brighton Paddock and further afield across Sandgate, the police and trackers were at a complete loss to either explain the murder or zero in on a definitive list of suspects. After a fortnight had passed, a young Irish labourer named John Rigney was arrested in Fortitude Valley on suspicion, simply because he'd visited Sandgate looking for work and had returned to Brisbane on the morning of the murder. Despite his court hearing being remanded repeatedly over a number of weeks, whilst the police worked in vain to find corroborating evidence implicating him in the murder, Rigney was eventually discharged and released. The police and trackers' efficiency in uncovering evidence in the murder were further questioned in May, when the badly decomposed body of William Turner Kennedy, a well-known station manager, was discovered by locals in close proximity to the site of Dubrocca's murder. Having ingested laudanum after a protracted period of financial woes, Kennedy's body had lain undiscovered for over a fortnight in an area supposedly scoured repeatedly by the authorities. Whilst found that Kennedy had played no role in Dubrocca's killing, it raised serious questions about the thoroughness of the official investigation. Without a scrap of evidence having been found, the case eventually went cold. Police postulated that, due to Dubrocca's bag at the murder scene being found empty, his demise may have been due to a robbery gone wrong. However, the theory was never ever able to be confirmed. Gervais Dubrocca's remains were interred in the grounds of the Sandgate Cemetery, now the Bald Hill Cemetery, and to this day, his murder remains entirely unsolved, despite a number of bizarre theories having been put forward over the years as to the Frenchman's premonition of dying by murder most foul.